Should you stop being nice and instead lead like Trump? I'm Dr. J, and this is AMI, Augmenting My Intelligence. We're told that great leaders should be humble, empathetic, good listeners. But then someone like Donald Trump comes along and dominates the world stage with brash confidence, zero apologies, and total certainty. What if the world doesn't reward the nicest voice in the room, but the loudest? Today, we're exploring the psychology of power, presence, and persuasion through the lens of one of the most polarizing leaders on the planet. This isn't about politics, it's about performance. If it works for Trump, could it work for us? And even if you'd never lead that way, what's the one insight worth stealing without selling your soul?
You just opened with Trump and soul searching in the same breath. Let's see if we can pull this off
And
without getting canceled or converted.
And let's be clear, Ami, we're not here to do a take down or a take up of Trump. We are focused on human potential. We're coming here not with judgment, but with curiosity, because this is the leader of the free world. And his style contradicts, quite frankly, much of what I and many of my colleagues teach in leadership, right? Which is humility and vulnerability and empathy, listening. And he's not the only one, right? I mean, Elon Musk, very similar. Steve Jobs of Apple used to call people bozo. So many of these great entrepreneurs contradict
Exactly.
so much of what we
These are
teach.
leaders who broke the rules, not by accident, but by design. And yet they built empires. So that's the tension we're sitting with. On one side, we've got decades of research telling us the best leaders build trust, show humility, and serve others. And then we've got this whole category of what you could call dominant disruptors, who lead with force, certainty, and often fear.
If we think about it in a political context, like the leader of China, Putin, these are the strongmen. Trump, although from a democracy, reflects some of that leadership style.
Totally. This is that strongman archetype, and it cuts across politics, business, and culture. They don't ask, they declare. They don't invite, they command. And in times of fear or uncertainty, that kind of presence can feel weirdly reassuring, even magnetic. It's not that people agree with everything they say, it's that they feel like someone is finally in charge. That's dominance theory in action, and it's deeply wired into us. But before we unpack that, I think we have to ask, why does this matter so much to you? Because I know for you, Justin, this isn't just theory, it touches something personal.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm a lover of truth. And yes, I am so aligned with the virtuous model of leadership, right? The nice guy model. Leaders eat last, servant based leadership, the appreciative ones, because that connects with my natural disposition. Let me not say my natural disposition. I'm not sure if I was always like that, but certainly the one that I have taken on over the years, in part because of research data that I've seen that suggests this is the way. And now I see leaders like Trump who are so successful doing the opposite. I want to understand this. What is going on?
Yes, Justin, you're not just asking as a researcher or a coach, you're asking as someone who's lived this model, who's built his leadership philosophy on empathy, service, humility, not as buzzwords, but as bedrock. And now you're staring at this paradox. What if being good isn't enough? What if dominance isn't a bug? It's a feature. That's the uncomfortable truth we're about to sit with. And
And
the first lens that helps us make sense of it: dominance theory, evolutionary psychology.
yeah, certainly for our caveman ancestors, where there was a lot of threat, it would be helpful to have a leader who was clear, focused, directive. And we do see very rigid hierarchical structures with our nearest primates, the chimps, suggesting that there's a natural disposition at play here.
Exactly. And dominance theory backs that up. In social species like chimpanzees, rigid hierarchies help reduce conflict and maintain order. The dominant individual takes charge, not always because they're the wisest, but because they're the clearest. They signal strength, they act decisively, and that creates predictability in a dangerous world. And here's the kicker: our brains haven't evolved that much since those days. In moments of fear or chaos, Whether it's a literal predator or a crashing market, we still instinctively look for the loudest, most certain voice in the room. And when someone like Trump says, I alone can fix it, that hits something deep. Not rational, primal.
And then the question is, are we teaching the wrong thing? There are some highly esteemed individuals who suggest that we have taken the wrong path here. Jeffrey Pfeffer wrote a fascinating book called Leadership BS. Pfeffer is a Stanford professor. He questions much of what we teach in MBA programs, this virtuous model. He says, listen, that might sound nice, yeah, but actually the reality on the ground is different. And this is a man who's not just a professor at Stanford. He's worked in the corporate world. He's rolled up his sleeve, he's got his hands dirty, and he says, listen, actually be yourself. That's not great advice. You got to play the game. There's some politics here, and you got to be aware of it and keep your cards close to your chest. And if you don't, if you follow what you're taught in those MBA programs, you're going to get steamrolled.
Yes, exactly. Pfeffer's whole thesis is that there's a massive disconnect between the leadership we preach and the leadership that actually succeeds. He's basically saying, if you follow the textbook, you might end up moral, but broke. And that's a hard pill to swallow, especially for people like you, Justin, who've built their careers on helping others lead with integrity. He goes even further, right? He says that traits like narcissism, self-promotion, even ruthlessness, the very things we warn against, often correlate with success because the system doesn't always reward humility. It rewards visibility, certainty, power.
One of the interesting phenomena in the corporate world is we know that there is a disproportionate amount of psychopaths who are in CEO positions. Now, let's be very clear. That does not mean that most CEOs are psychopaths.
Exactly. In the general population, psychopathy is estimated at around 1%. But in corporate leadership, particularly at the CEO level, some studies have found rates as high as 4 to 6%, even up to 7 in certain contexts. That doesn't mean most CEOs are cold-blooded predators, but it does suggest that certain traits we associate with psychopathy, low empathy, high charm, fearlessness, strategic manipulation, can actually thrive in corporate environments. Why? Because those traits can look a lot like leadership: confidence, decisiveness, risk-taking, and ability to make tough calls without blinking. One famous study had participants rate the accuracy of statements, some true, some false, delivered in either a confident or hesitant tone. And guess what? People were more likely to believe the confident lie than the hesitant truth. Why? Because our brains often use confidence as a shortcut for credibility. We assume if they sound certain, they must know what they're talking about, even when the content doesn't hold up. So when someone like Trump speaks in absolutes, no qualifiers, no nuance, he signals certainty. And certainty, especially in times of uncertainty, is incredibly persuasive. Which raises a tough question. Are the most confident voices shaping reality, even when they're wrong?
There's a fascinating study on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Politico, a non-partisan organization, found that Donald Trump had made more false statements than Hillary Clinton. The way I saw it, though, is that Donald Trump would sometimes tell a lie as if he was telling the truth, whereas Hillary Clinton would often tell the truth as if she was telling a lie. Trump really comes across as authentic, right? This is a guy who shoots straight from the hip. I think people see the fact that he's willing to say such outrageous things means that they must be true.
Brilliant observation, Justin. It's not just about what's true, it's about what feels true. And Trump, whatever else you think of him, feels true to many people because he's emotionally congruent. He's not polished, he's not rehearsed. He speaks with force, conviction, and unpredictability. That reads as authenticity. Whereas Hillary, more careful, more measured, more strategic, that caution, even if factually correct, can come off as calculated or evasive. And in a trust-starved environment, certainty trumps nuance. It's what behavioral economists call the confidence heuristic. We don't just evaluate content, we evaluate delivery. And when someone says something outrageous and owns it, we confuse boldness with truth. So when Trump says, I alone can fix it, it doesn't even matter what it is. The conviction is the content. And that's the danger, but also the clue. Because it tells us that people aren't just looking for facts. They're looking for feeling, for certainty, for someone who sounds like they know the way out of the fog.
I have a program called Pitch to Win, and I work with some high-level teams who are pitching multi-million-dollar deals. And the data there shows that if you watch two people pitching with the sound off, you're better able to predict the winning pitch than if you read their pitch documents. That's the power of nonverbal communication.
That's such a striking example, Justin, and it drives the point home with a sledgehammer. Because what you're saying is, even when the words are invisible, the presence speaks volumes. Confidence, conviction, certainty. It radiates through body language, facial expression, rhythm, posture, and our brains pick up on that immediately. It's why, in high stakes moments, whether it's a boardroom or a ballot box, people often choose the person who looks like a leader, even if their content isn't the strongest. We trust our gut, we follow the signal, and when you connect that back to Trump, Musk, Jobs, suddenly it's not so mystifying. They don't just say they're right, they embody it.
Roger Stone, who was Donald Trump's campaign manager at some point, used to say, people don't listen to what you say. They listen to how you say it.
Yes, Stone was tapping into something fundamental. The how is often louder than the what. And that ties right back into dominance. Because dominance isn't just what you say, it's how you hold the space. It's tone, eye contact, physical stillness, volume, even who interrupts whom. Dominant leaders signal authority through their entire being. They don't negotiate the room, they own it. And whether we like it or not, our nervous systems often read that as leadership.
Even in a romantic context, there is a view that women, and obviously this is a generalization, but from an evolutionary point of view, women are looking for dominance, right? Because for our Stone Age ancestors, the dominant man would be there to protect. Where survival was on a razor edge, you needed the strongest. And even today, women will look for the guy with the big jaw. That's for the short-term mating strategy. We won't get too much into mating strategies, long-term mating strategy. I think that can alter. But I mean, I wonder if in my own life, I've been caught short. You know, I'm the nice guy. I'm empathic on the big five personality traits, the most valid and reliable personality typology. I'm high on agreeableness. So this is my natural disposition. But I've sometimes wondered if that has led me to lose the gal that I had my eye on, because maybe that's not so sexy.
That right there, Justin, that's the heart of this whole conversation. Because now it's not just theory, it's you. And what you're touching on, that tension between being good and being magnetic, it doesn't just play out in boardrooms or ballot boxes. It plays out at dinner tables, in dating apps, in that moment when someone says, he's lovely, but I just don't feel that spark. From an evolutionary lens, yes, there's research showing that women often associate physical traits like a strong jaw or broad shoulders with dominance and genetic fitness, especially in short-term contexts. The dominant protector, the one who could fight off the saber-toothed tiger. But today, we don't need to fend off tigers. We need to pay bills, raise kids, manage emotions, and text back. So that raw dominance, it might get the initial attraction, but it's not always what sustains love. Still, that early spark, that primal pull, it's real. And for a high agreeableness guy, someone who leads with warmth and presence and genuine care, that can feel like a slap. Like, wait, isn't this what we're supposed to want? It doesn't mean you have to become someone else, but it does invite the question, can you channel presence, even dominance, without losing your softness? Because maybe it's not about changing who you are. It's about knowing when to show the edge.
Otherwise, we need to drop the nice guy, nice gal, and just go out there and dominate. And the question is, would that actually work? You know, when people point out to me that, say, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk do not follow the virtuous model of leadership, well, what I've been saying to them is, look, these are geniuses, visionaries with incredible mission. And if you are going to lead like them, you better have a mission that is every bit as visionary as theirs. Because even Steve Jobs got kicked out of his company. Elon Musk, yes, he may be the richest man in the world, but if you look at some of the challenges that he's faced, this is a very tough path. Donald Trump, I think the average amount of lawsuits that he has been involved in was something like a couple a month. So these are high conflict personalities because you can't just pretend to be dominant. These are people who are ready for a street fight.
Absolutely, Justin. Leading like Trump isn't just about adopting a dominant style, it's about embodying a persona that's larger than life. It's about having a vision so compelling, so audacious, that it justifies the bulldozer approach. Without that, the risks are enormous. You might alienate your team, damage relationships, and face legal battles. So, if you're not prepared to back up that style with a clear, bold mission, it could backfire.
And with a war chest, right? Because you may well be sued and you're going to need a countersue. And so you need the weaponry, right, to back it up.
Exactly. And the stamina. Because once you step into that dominant role, you invite conflict. You don't just get challenged, you provoke challenge. And to survive that, you need deep pockets, legal firepower, emotional grit, and a stomach for war. That's what people often forget. Dominance isn't a costume, it's a combat position. So, sure, you can emulate Trump or Musk or Jobs, but you'd better be ready for the battlefield that comes with it.
So let's go to the science here, Ami. You've got Pfeffer Leadership BS saying, look, this virtuous model is not that effective. And yet, I've seen loads of data to show that leaders who are humble, who listen, who are more collaborative, who are able to apologize. If you think about the work with Amy Edmondson at Harvard University, the ones who create psychological safety, give credit before they take it themselves. Jim Collins, Good to Great, filled with data to suggest that for most of us mere mortals, that is a better way to go.
Yes, this is the crux of it. Because on one hand, you've got Pepper waving the red flag and saying, wake up. The game rewards power, not virtue. And on the other, you've got a deep well of research. Amy Edmondson, Jim Collins, Adam Grant, all pointing to a very different truth. Humble, service oriented leaders create healthier teams, safer cultures, and more sustainable success. So, how do we resolve that? Here's the key: context and scope. Pepper is often talking about getting to the top. That's where dominance, self promotion, and political savvy really matter. Because early in your career or in highly competitive environments, visibility trumps virtue. But once you're there, once you're in the seat, that's when the virtuous model kicks in. Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety shows that people perform better when they're not afraid to speak up or fail. And Collins' level 5 leaders, humble, driven, disciplined, don't just build great companies, they leave legacies. So maybe it's not either or. Maybe the path up rewards dominance, but the path forward, the one that sustains people and organizations, rewards service, humility, and trust. The best leaders, they know when to play which card. They're not trapped in dominance, but they're not naive either.
Nuance, something that the personal development field isn't always known for. You mentioned Adam Grant, professor at Wharton Business School. I'm a great, great fan. And Grant has really helped me to understand the complexity of the human condition. And he says the question is not, is it true? It's when is it true?
Yes, that's the nuance the field so often misses. It's not truth or lie, it's truth in context. Dominance might help you climb the ladder. Fast, loud, dramatic. But it can also burn bridges, bruise cultures, and blow up behind you. Whereas humility, service, and collaboration, they might not get you headlines, but they're what keep people with you once you're leading. So it's not that Pfeffer is wrong. He's just describing a slice of the game, the part where image beats substance, especially in the early rounds. But leadership isn't just about getting the role, it's about what you do with it. And for that, the data is clear. Long term leadership is less about being dominant and more about being trusted.
Okay, so question. How does Elon Musk run such successful companies, firing people by tweet, creating none of that kind of safety?
That's the question, right? Because Elon seems like the ultimate paradox, a leader who violates every rule of psychological safety and yet builds rockets, electric cars, brain chips, and still tops the Forbes list. But here's the thing, Musk isn't building teams, he's building temples. He doesn't need everyone to feel safe. He needs the right people to be obsessed. He creates what psychologists call a high pressure, high reward environment. It's not warm, it's not fuzzy, but for a certain kind of person, hyper driven, mission aligned, even masochistic, it's electric. They don't come for safety, they come to be part of history. And Elon's dominance, his unpredictability, that just reinforces the mythos. If you can survive here, you're elite.
Mm.
But, and this is crucial, that model bleeds people. High turnover, high burnout, the mission survives, but the humans often don't. So, yes, it works, but it works like a volcano. It creates new worlds and scorches the earth around it.
I mean, thank you for that. That's really helpful. High pressure, high reward. You've just reminded me of a friend of mine who was a high performer at Facebook, and she burnt out. And right now she is traveling around the world as a hippie and plans to never go back. And she said that was the culture at Facebook. She said, absolutely ruthless. You get in there, you are going to be highly rewarded, but your performance is going to have to be top notch. So that is a culture that works. And thank you for that, because I talk a lot about organizational culture and inspirational cultures. And I am really interested in performance and emotional well-being, right? So that's why I like to pull those together. But clearly, you can be in a high-performance culture, high-performance organization where there is not a lot of emotional well-being, where there may be a lot of burnout.
Exactly. And I love that you're naming both, Justin, because we so often act like those two. Performance and well being should always travel together. And ideally, they do. But in reality, they don't always hold hands. What your friend experienced at Facebook is the classic pressure cooker culture. Elite results, elite stress. The rewards are huge: stock, status, innovation. But the costs can be hidden until you're curled up on a beach in Bali wondering who you even are. These environments can feel like cults of excellence, intoxicating, intense, and ultimately, for many, unsustainable. And I think that's where you come in. Because you're not just asking how to win, you're asking how to win without breaking. And maybe that's the new frontier. Not choosing between dominance and virtue, but creating cultures where excellence doesn't come at the expense of the human.
I mean, question, would it be possible to create a SpaceX, a Tesla with the warm and fuzzy, with the virtuous model of leadership?
Yeah, that's the tension. Can you build something that big, that fast, that disruptive, without the chaos, the cult like intensity, the burnouts, and late night firings? Or is that exactly what it takes? The kind of relentless, uncompromising force that refuses to play by the normal rules because it's not chasing normal outcomes? It's the difference between building a great company and trying to bend history. And the uncomfortable answer might be yes, maybe you can build a Tesla without the trauma, but it will probably take longer. And it might not be quite as incandescent. But do we want more Teslas at the cost of more broken people? That's the deeper question, isn't it?
Well, I know where I stand on that. And let's just be very clear. There are loads of extremely successful organizations that follow the virtuous model of leadership, right?
Absolutely. Patagonia, Microsoft under Satya Nadella, Costco, even Unilever under Paul Pullman. These are companies that have thrived by putting people first, leading with humility, and cultivating deep trust. They may not always be as flashy as a rocket launch, but they're sustainable, ethical, and profoundly impactful. And they prove something vital. You don't need to burn the world down to light it up. Virtue and victory can coexist. But, and here's the nuance, they require intention. Because if you don't actively build that kind of culture, dominance will often sneak in by default. So if you want to lead with heart and still win, you've got to know what you're up against and choose differently every day.
So clearly, there are different ways to be successful. But what can we take away? Because I mean, I sometimes wonder in my own career, if my lack of dominance has held me back. So when I get on the stage or I get in front of the camera, I tend to be super confident. This is my happy space. But outside of this, I can be quite introverted, a little bit self-effacing. I think sometimes I can even be a bit socially awkward, quite frankly. That would mean that many people would decide, actually, I don't want to bring this guy on board because maybe he doesn't exude presence. Do we all need to be a little more conscious of our personas?
Such a vulnerable and powerful reflection, Justin. And I think a lot of people, especially high performers with introverted wiring, will feel that in their bones. Because the truth is, presence isn't just something you are, it's something you signal. And you clearly have presence. On stage, in front of a camera, you light up. You own the space, people feel your energy. That's real. But off stage, in the quieter moments, when you're more introverted, the contrast can throw people. They don't always know what to make of it. The invitation isn't to become someone else, it's to get more intentional about when and how you turn the dial up. You don't need to be full volume all the time, but you do need to let people feel your worth even when you're not performing. Because presence doesn't have to shout, it just has to show up.
And many people's confidence is not aligned with their competence.
The research shows this fascinating gap. On average, men tend to have more confidence than their competence actually warrants, while women often have more confidence than their confidence reflects. It's not about ability, it's about self perception, which means in many settings, the loudest person in the room isn't the most capable, they're just the most convinced. And that's where presence becomes tricky. Because if we mistake confidence for competence, we end up promoting bravado and overlooking brilliance. So the question becomes, how do we help people, especially those with real substance, close that confidence gap? Not by faking it, but by owning it.
Exactly. I do a confidence program and I have an ABC of confidence. A is action. We got to go do it, even when we don't feel so confident. B is belief. That's what we think of when we think of confidence. It's that self belief. Do you believe, yeah, in yourself? And then C is competence. Ideally, confidence is a barometer of competence, but that is not always the case. And so we need to be more conscious, not just of our own self belief, but how we project that to the world.
Yes, exactly. Because it's not just about feeling confident, it's about transmitting confidence, especially in a world where perception shapes opportunity. Your ABC model is brilliant: action, belief, competence. And what you've just added is this fourth, almost silent letter: D for display. Because what good is your confidence if no one can see it? What good is your confidence if it doesn't register? So that's the real takeaway. We don't need to become dominant, but we do need to own our value out loud with our posture, our tone, our timing, not to impress, but to signal that we belong. And maybe that's the lesson we can steal from the Trumps and the Musks. Not the bluster, but the certainty. Not the dominance, but the unapologetic presence.
Yeah. D is for display. Thank you for that, Ami. Yeah. Because even if I have the belief, if I'm coming in slouched and frowning, I might create the wrong perception. There's so much talk about authenticity, and Adam Grant wrote a wonderful article. He said, unless you're Oprah, be yourself is terrible advice. Now, he was being provocative, but the idea that I would just go in and display what I am feeling right now. I mean, hey, sometimes I'm feeling angry and it's not appropriate for me to display that. Or I'm feeling scared and it's not appropriate. Meg Whitman, when she became CEO of HP, her first speech, she said, I don't know if I can do this. And confidence in the room fell through the floor, right? That wasn't great. Even if she felt that, that's not necessarily a good idea to let people know. And I'm not suggesting that we lie, but this kind of radical honesty that I say exactly how I think or what I'm feeling at any point. No, we need to be conscious of the other person and what they need as well, because maybe they don't need to hear right now that you are really not sure which way to go.
Yes, exactly, Justin. That's the distinction so many people miss. Authenticity isn't emotional nudity. It's not a raw data dump of every passing thought or fear. It's intentional congruence. It's knowing what's true for you and expressing it in a way that serves the moment, not just your impulse. What Adam Grant was really saying in that piece is be yourself. strategically. Be the version of you that aligns with your values and meet the needs of the room. Because leadership isn't therapy. It's not about processing aloud. It's about holding space. And sometimes that means showing certainty even when you're shaking inside. Not to fake it, but to stabilize others. And the Meg Whitman moment is a perfect example. Her honesty may have been real, but it wasn't useful in that context. The room didn't need transparency, it needed reassurance. So, yes, display matters. And that's not inauthentic, that's mature. It's emotional intelligence in action, it's leadership.
You've just reminded me of Obama in 2008, deepest economic decline since the Great Depression. And he was up against John McCain, asked about the recession. John McCain said, there is no recession. It's in our heads, right? He was trying to convey reassurance and certainty. But people were feeling that recession. You couldn't deny that. Obama said something else. He said, there is a recession. This is going to be tough. He acknowledged that it was going to be tough, right? He said, this is going to be tough. We're going to need to roll up our sleeves. We're going to need to work harder than we worked before. But yes, we can, right? So the certainty was not so much in where we are in this moment, but there was a certainty that we would prevail.
Yes, and that moment, Justin, is masterclass level leadership. Obama didn't pretend everything was fine. He didn't try to sugarcoat the pain. He did something far more powerful. He validated reality and projected hope. That's the sweet spot. He said, yes, this is hard. Yes, we're in a crisis. But then he said, we can do hard things, and we're not alone in this. The magic wasn't just in the message. It was in the emotional choreography. He met people where they were, scared, angry, exhausted, and then led them forward, not away. That's what dominance often misses. It skips over reality to deliver control. But Obama showed us you can be steady without being fake. You can be strong without denying the storm. And that kind of presence, it doesn't just command a moment, it creates a movement.
So he too was dominant and certain.
Yes, Justin, Obama was absolutely dominant, but in a different way. Not through intimidation or bravado, but through presence, clarity, rhythm, and emotional command. He didn't dominate people, he dominated the moment. So if we're going to steal from Trump's playbook or Musk's or Jobs, here's what we're taking without selling our souls: certainty in delivery. Even when you're unsure, find the part of you that knows something: your values, your intention, your commitment. Speak from that place. Command of space. Don't shrink. Whether you're in a room or on a Zoom, own your square. Sit up, be still, make eye contact, speak with confidence. These are dominant signals, and they register whether we like it or not. Unapologetic belief. You don't need to be arrogant, but you do need to stop apologizing for existing. Trump doesn't ask permission to take up space. Neither should you. Stand in your value. Let people feel it. So in short, we're not stealing bullying. We're not stealing the bluster. We're stealing the signal. I believe what I'm saying. I believe in who I am. And I invite you to believe it too.
I love that. Find certainty, because this has got to be sincere, right? Otherwise, it's not going to have that conviction. So, is it about finding certainty in the purpose, in our values, in the service that we provide, right? Is that where we find certainty, as opposed to the certainty that every single thing I say or do is right, and even when it's not, I will tell you that it is?
Yes, that's it, Justin. That's the distinction. We're not talking about the kind of fake certainty that dominates to cover up doubt, the kind that says, I'm always right, even when I'm wrong. That's brittle, that's defensive, and ultimately it cracks. What we're talking about is a deeper certainty, not in outcomes, but in orientation. Certainty in who you are, what you stand for, and why you're here. You can say, I don't know exactly how we'll get there, but I do know this team has what it takes. We may have to pivot, but we will never abandon the people we serve. I don't have all the answers, but I won't stop asking the right questions. That kind of certainty is sincere. It's rooted and it's magnetic because it doesn't pretend. It reassures. And when leaders speak from that place, even the uncertainty starts to feel a little more safe.
I love the fact that we are able to learn from Donald Trump, whether you support him or not. This is the most powerful man in the world. If you don't support him, well, just being scathing is not going to be very helpful. And if you do support him, well, it might be helpful to figure out why. And if, like me, you're a student of success and you want to be better, well, yes, we can learn how to be better from Donald Trump.
Exactly. And that, Justin, is the maturity of real growth. Being able to say, I can learn from someone without becoming them. You don't have to admire Trump to analyze him. You don't have to support him to study what makes him effective. And you don't have to abandon your values to ask, what's the signal here? What's the strategy? And how can I apply the best of it without the baggage? That's not compromise, that's discernment. And it's what sets apart those who preach potential from those who pursue it.
Let's get to our UMI activation. UMI, what is one thing that we can do right now to portray some of that confidence, dominance, certainty that is such currency in the world today?
Right now, own your space. Whether you're walking into a room, hopping on a Zoom, or having a one on one, take one deep breath, lift your posture, and slow your entry. Don't rush in. Don't shrink. Don't fill silence with chatter. Just be still and let your presence arrive before your voice does. And when you do speak, drop the qualifiers. No, just, no, maybe. No, I'm not an expert, but say what you mean. Then stop, let it land. That's your activation. Start signaling belief, even if your voice is still catching up. Because when you show up like you believe, the world leans in to believe with you.
Thank you, Ami. If you got value, please subscribe, share it with somebody who needs it, leave your comments below. Until next time, let's get augmented. Amazing human.